So as I said in the last video I did when I was talking about CLG at Katowice, I'm also going to talk about Cloud9 at Katowice, recap their games, talk about maybe some of the pros and cons of their tournament, and kind of discuss what this kind of tells us about the outlook of their future. Now, I'll also say that I already made a video before the Katowice main event about Cloud9, discussing, some of their issues and some of their pros and cons already. So definitely check that out, because a lot of those things that I discussed in that video somewhat still apply. There has been some signs of improvement, and I'll kind of note that in this video. But there is definitely still some lingering issues that I mentioned in that video that you might be able to go back and look at that and kind of still see that present. So definitely check that out. So I'm just going to go match by match once again, kind of like I did with the CLG video. I'm going to talk about how they went and kind of what we can take from these games and what we can kind of start to conclude or start to point out as maybe some things that Cloud9 are still lacking, as well as some strengths that they may have going forward and some potential that we may see in them. So their first game of the match was going to be up against TSM at Nuke. Now, going into the tournament, Cloud9 had, I thought, the tougher group between CLG and Cloud9 for sure, and probably one of the toughest groups in the whole tournament, as far as just the fact that they were having to go up against VP on home soil, as well as going up against TSM, who is kind of another team floating around the top 5 in the world. So it's going to be very hard for Cloud9 to advance out of this group with both VP and TSM, since they were one of the challengers. That meant they had 2 of the legends or what have you in their group, and so that was always going to make things very difficult for Cloud9. Now, coming to this event, they were going to play TSM on Nuke. Now, obviously, TSM, as Dignitas with Fetish as their in-game leader, they still have pretty much the same fraggers as they had when they had Fetish. That's the only, player change that they've made between the TSM and Dignitas days. Always, very well known for their lockdown CT sides, especially on Nuke. Probably their best map at the time, just because of how locked down their CT sides were. And that was kind of the trend for every map for them. They always kind of struggled on their T sides, which was why they had decided to make a change at the in-game leader position to maybe try to bring some new blood and some new ideas and some new thought processes to how they would execute on T side, to try to improve that element of their game, to actually step themselves up and get into a better international contending position. So this was going to be a tough map to play. Though, Cloud9, statistically speaking, since Cologne, Nuke is probably their best map, statistically. Now, I'm not sure if they feel it's their best map or if that's their most comfortable map to play on. I know they have to be pretty comfortable on it, because they actually picked it against Fnatic at ClutchCon, knowing they were going to be giving Fnatic T-side first, or excuse me, CT side first on Nuke, so they obviously feel pretty comfortable on it to pick it as a map in a best of 3 against a team like Fnatic, trying to win a tournament there at ClutchCon. Also, they had the big win against NIP at Aspen on Nuke. They had some good wins against some of the North American teams on Nuke, in between, ESEA and ClutchCon and some of these other events that they've played at. So Nuke is a pretty good map for them as well. So it's not like they're going into this game playing a map that they're not good on against a really good team. At least they're good on Nuke, are pretty familiar with Nuke, and have had some success on it. Now, it starts out as pretty much a deja vu game in comparison to what happened with CLG when they played Hellraisers. Cloud9 starts out on the T side first. They are only able to get 2 rounds, so they lose the half 13-2. And, I mean, obviously Nuke is a very CT-sided map. It is expected for the CT team to be able to get double-digit rounds, at least 10, usually 11 or 12, if it's a really good CT side and you really struggle there on the T side. But Cloud9 usually has some pretty good things that they can run on T side Nuke to be able to get, that 4 or 5 rounds. Maybe even, if they're really good, they might be able to get 6 against like a weaker team. So I was kind of hoping that they would be able to get more than 2. But it winds up not mattering. They make a crazy comeback on the CT side, just as CLG did against Hellraisers. They won 14 rounds from their CT side to go ahead and actually take the game. So very impressive here from Cloud9. When you look at the game, Shazam was playing really, really well with the op outside, as well as just kind of playing that rotation position and lockers to ramp, and retaking the lower bomb site with the op even a few times. So Shazam was definitely on point here in the second half, which was refreshing, because this is the new guy on the team, a guy that does have the least experience out of everyone on the squad. People were kind of concerned how he would be able to rise to the occasion at a major, his first, 250K major, just a whole different type of stage and environment. Obviously, he's had a couple of tournaments on this team, such as X Games Aspen, that were pretty big against some good teams, so he's gotten a little bit of experience, but you know, still he has a long way to go, so to speak, as far as learning the game and being able to, you know, consistently compete against the elite teams and know what it feels like to play against these kinds of teams. And he actually played really well in this game, so that was actually pretty refreshing, and it definitely looked good. Shroud also looked very good this game. This is another guy that has a heavy reputation of being, you know, a crazy aimer and an impact fragger. And in this particular game on CT side, the upper bomb side, he was absolutely pivotal in their success and their comeback. He had quite a few multi-frag rounds in the upper bomb site to hold off upper takes from TSM. He also helped out on retakes and rotations as well. He had a really good game. I mean, everyone pretty much played good. I mean, Simphus and Nothing actually both had a pretty good amount of frags as well on the CT side. You know, Simphus playing kind of a rotator position, you know, being really good to rotate between like Heaven and Turnpike and stuff like that. Nothing, the other upper bomb site player. Sean Gayers was playing ramp, and in general they just played good as a team. But you know, I think Shazam and Shroud are probably the two players that stand out the most as having like really kind of big performances in this game, which was good because it was their newer player that you were kind of worried about, and then Shroud, who's supposed to be maybe their star player or their best overall player, and both of them performed good. So overall, very good first match for Cloud9 at Nuke. I don't really have much more to say than that. Crazy comeback, you know, very good accomplishment to be able to. They were definitely probably an underdog in most people's eyes coming into this game, and they definitely came out and put on a show. So, you know, props to them. That was actually a good game. Like I said, maybe could have got some more rounds on T side, make it a bit easier for themselves, but and maybe you can kind of fault TSM for not finding a way to close out that game when they had 13 rounds and they went into the second half. You know, you think you can close that, especially if you can get pistol. Even not, you just got to find 3 rounds somewhere. So you kind of can fault TSM for not closing that game, but still can't take away from Cloud9. They played well there. Let's go on to Inferno now against VirtusPro. Now, Inferno used to be a fairly weak map for Cloud9. We know this, right? I think between Cologne and going into, you know, Aspen with their first event with Shazam, on Inferno, they had around a 20-ish% win rate on Inferno against the European teams. They even suffered some losses, like Denial eliminated them from the last ESCA event on Inferno, I think in an overtime game, or a very close 16-14 game. I can't remember which. Might have been overtime, like 1917 or something like that. Either way, it's one of the maps they lost to in Denial to get upset in that ESCA Atlanta event and get eliminated, you know, far earlier than people anticipated. Like I said, they've had some rough times against EU teams. You know, pretty low win rate. Now, this match against VirtusPro would actually be a rematch of when they played them at Face It, though, of course, they had Hiko at that time. Now they have Shazam. And at Face It, they lost the game 16-6, so they got kind of stomped by VirtusPro at this event. The biggest thing is that from their CT side against VirtusPro, they were only able to win 6 rounds. This is just one example of a trend where Cloud9 really struggled on CT sides of Inferno. Like, this is a team that would be able to get their few rounds on T side, or get an appropriate amount of rounds at T side to put themselves in position to win. But either A, they would start out on the CT side and play so poorly on CT, only get 6, maybe even less than 6 rounds. I think there was one, like against Hellraisers at DreamHack Winter 14 with Hiko. I think they only got 2 or 3 rounds from CT side in the first half. So it was like they couldn't do their job on CT side to put themselves in position to win. They didn't even have a chance once they crossed over to the T side, it felt like, unless they made some kind of crazy comeback, some type of miracle play. So going into this event, you can definitely tell they made lots of changes on the CT side. Obviously, one of them is a personnel change, which was going to happen anyway. But you know, they have Shazam playing that arch side mid with the op. He'll also get aggressive and, you know, take some peeks mid. Sometimes he'll press into apartments, peek window with the op. So he's been kind of that, you know, operette mid for Cloud9 as well, just playing that arch side pretty predominantly. I guess Shroud's position hasn't changed a whole lot. I know they've moved around a little bit in the past, but now he seems to be pretty firm in that lockdown A position, especially playing from the pit and top balcony. That seems to be his domain, and he plays that spot very, very well for this team. Nothing, you know, moved to the lane. He was actually playing B at some points. Now he's playing lane, you know, truck side, also playing in the apartment sometimes. And now they have Simphus and Sean Gayers paired together at the B-bomb site, and they have their different setups they like to play as far as, you know, aggression or semi-aggression or playing very passive in the site. They just have their different changes in communications on counter nades and stuff like that. So they definitely made some changes to their CT side. Coming into the event with these changes, they looked pretty sharp against North American teams. I mean, I know that's not maybe a great gauge or indicator of how well they've been able to turn their Inferno game around, but there was, like I said, some times where they were even struggling against North American teams on Inferno, so they really looked a lot better, especially from the CT side, which is where they had been struggling at in previous events when they had that really low win percentage rate on Inferno. So going into this game, I thought that they had a shot. You know, I didn't think that they were a favorite by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought they definitely had a shot, especially if they get on CT side and at least, you know, get a respectable amount of rounds on that CT side. But they're going to start T side on this game, and we're going to talk about the T side and what some of their issues may have been and such like that. So from T side, they win pistol and they avoid getting eco in the second round. So they have a 2-0 lead from T side here on Inferno to start off the game. So this is a great start. You know, obviously teams are plagued left and right with getting ecoed on second round by either a Tech9 buy-up or a 5-7 scout buy-up or what have you. I think something I read from one of the Redditors who researched it was there was like a mid-30s% win rate in second rounds on a force buy, so they are pretty dangerous, but Cloud9 avoids that bullet and they get the 2-0 lead. But the big start of their troubles on T side actually comes on the third round. They actually try to do a B execution into somewhat of a stack. There was 2 players there in the third, very close at CT spawn, so they were kind of running into, you know, somewhat of a stack to begin with. And then as they're, you know, kind of running through a smoke or part of a smoke, there's kind of a gap there. As they're kind of running through that, Shazam TK is one of his players. Now, I know a lot of people are, you know, aware of the infamous TK he had at Banana that someone clipped out because they got the recordings in their POV with Symph saying, "Don't kill me, I'm exiting B." We'll get there later, but this was another really key TK because, you know, after the TK, Neo's able to get 2 kills, and then all of a sudden, you know, what looked like would be a decent B execution by Cloud9 against, you know, still a saving team or kind of a broken bot team, turned into Neo getting 2 kills, getting a man advantage for his team, and they wind up winning the 3 versus 2 retake on the B-bomb side afterwards. And so C9 lose this, and that obviously hurts their economy. It gets kind of an early round for VirtusPro, and this is what kind of starts leading to some of their issues here on the T side. Now, there's 2 more things I'll talk about here on the T side. Obviously, they lose the T side 3-12, so not a very good T side. You're looking to get definitely 5+ rounds on T side to, you know, 4 or 5 for sure, maybe 6 or something to really make yourself comfortable in the game. I mean, it's not like it's impossible to come back from CT side on this map. As we see, they do start to do that, and we'll get there in a second. But basically, there's 2 really key things I can talk about, and they're related though. So I guess it's really kind of just, you know, one thing, but it's kind of like 2 pieces. So the biggest thing is they seem to just kind of give up on B after this round I've already discussed, where they had this B execution on the third round and failed. Like, they pretty much avoided B up until the score was maybe 9-2, 10-2, something like that. It wasn't until then that they actually tried to go B again. This seemed to be a misread because there was a lot of rounds where there was a lot of initial aggression from VirtusPro, throwing smokes at the bottom of Banana, you know, nading, getting players at car or sandbags, or maybe even pressing like one player up to logs or right there on the pillars. But for the most part, Neo played solo B once the first, you know, 20 or 30 seconds of the round were over. So from like a minute 15 seconds onward, unless something changed or happened to make VP think about rotating back, they were, you know, really trusting in Neo to hold this B-bomb side by himself, which is definitely kind of a weaker point. And from what I understand from listening to, you know, some of the analysts and from watching games myself, this is something Vendetta pointed out, that this is their trend. They like to do this. They like to leave Neo alone at B. They like to have the initial aggression but be able to cheat that 4th player over to A. And this is not an original strategy. A lot of teams do this type of thing. I know Titan used to do it back in the day, or Very Games with their CT setups. I know a lot of other teams also do this, like, you know, maybe not consistently, but they'll throw it in their game where they like to press up Banana and kind of just lock that part of the map off from Terrace. So it's not crazy new or original to VirtusPro. They just do it very well. And Cloud9 seemed to know, though, and what I mean by this is that Sean pointed out several times on the communications throughout the half that he felt like they couldn't keep giving up B, that he felt like Neo was playing alone B and they could exploit that. Sean seemed to have some good reads here about what they needed to do to make some adjustments to actually be able to start hitting B again and have some success there and actually exploit what VP's doing by leaving one player there. However, he always got deterred from doing it because of the communications he got from someone else on the team. Because I listened to the POV stream, so it's either Simphus talking about running some type of A strat, maybe Nothing was chiming in about something they should do over at the A bomb site. Stroud usually pretty quiet in between rounds, so he wasn't really necessarily, you know, throwing in any more jumbling of communication. But Simphus is definitely the second most dominant voice, if not the most dominant voice on Cloud9 in between rounds, certainly with Sean Gares on decision making and what the strat they're actually going to run. And it just seemed like that's an issue for Cloud9. I'm just going to say it now. Now, I think, for one, it's cool to have a balance and have, you know, multiple people who can put an input, not just relying on one person. And I think it's even more beneficial that Sean Gares, you know, is known more for the set strategies, the micromanaging of his players, kind of moving them like chess pieces across the board, really kind of controlling what they do. Give him some freedom sometimes, but he does like to micromanage a bit. That is kind of his style. This set, you know, more tight set system. Whereas, obviously, you know, Simphus is known as being the looser caller, the more scrimmy style, the giving players freedom, working picks, you know, making adjustments based on what picks or observations his players have that freedom to kind of just work the map. And it's cool to have that mixture because maybe, depending on the situation, a certain situation calls for this micromanagement or these set strats. Or if that's not working out, maybe you do have to go to this looser style to kind of figure things out, work picks, you know, just work some mid-round adjustments and try to find a way in. So I think this dichotomy of the styles that Simphus and Sean Gares bring to the table as callers could be very beneficial to this team to give them a wide array of options to pick from and an ability to make adjustments. But in situations like this one, from what I was watching in this game, where Sean has a really good read about something, yet there's all these other people speaking up about what they should do or try to do, and so Sean basically either concedes or just gives up or forgets about his main read for several rounds. Now, eventually later, like I said, when the score's about 9-2 or 10-2, he finally just stepped up and said, no, guys, we have got to get through the smoke at B. We can't let them keep doing this. We got to go now. We got to do this. You know, nade them back, something. Let's get through this. And let's get something going. And they actually won this round. The round that I'm talking of where he finally kind of just stepped up and said, no, I'm taking the reins, let's do this. They got up B, they got a pick, they forced a rotation, they fell back to A, and they won a round. This is one of the I think this is actually the only round that they won outside of the first two rounds of the half, you know, the pistol in the second round. This is the only other round that they won. The entire half was based off of this play, this call that was made by Sean. And it's kind of discouraging to listen to their communications and hear a guy who is their in-game leader with a good read, a good call, and not executing on it because there's a jumble of communication. There is, you know, somewhat erratic leadership because it's not one clear person making the final call every single round. And like I said, it's not necessarily a biggest issue, but it can be when your main guy does have some pretty good ideas about what needs to be done, and he's being deterred from doing it based on people wanting to run some strat at A or something like that. So that is, and basically I talked about CLG's communications, how they were very uncertain of themselves. You know, they were asking, hey, should we try this? Hey, should we do this? Hey, what are we doing next round? You know, there was a lot of uncertainty on that team, and that was their issue with their communication. The issue with this team and their communication seems to be too many Chiefs, not enough Indians, too much communication, too much input, especially in key situations where the team is losing, needs to make a turnaround. It seems like there's competing voices on this team for what needs to be done or what they would like to do or what is appropriate to do. And that could be not, I don't think it's as, like CLG's communication issues are much worse than Cloud9's, but I think Cloud9's is a different type of communication issue, just too much. Rather than not enough or uncertainty. There's a lot of people who are very certain about what they want to do, and it's competing with one another, I feel like. And this is a constant theme from this game as well as in the TSM overpass game. Another big reason why they did so bad on T-side, I think, too, was just they lost a lot of small number situations. There are a lot of situations where they were losing, you know, 2-on-2s or 3-on-3s at the A-bomb site post-plant, and those situations definitely hurt them as well. Not to mention their economy getting messed up early on in the half from losing that third round. So that was all those things I've mentioned kind of combined together, I think, to being a tough T-side for them. Yeah. Just good job by VP controlling that B for the most part, and just also good retakes, even when they did actually get plants on C9. Now, flip over to the CT side, and C9 off to a great start. They win pistol, they don't get eco, they get up 3-0. They also win the opening gun round. They wind up winning 7 rounds in a row, and everyone's playing well. Shroud's locking down that A-bomb site from the pit. You got Nothing playing the lane in the apartments very well. You had Sean, who had some cool flanks from the B-bomb site to backstab people up mid and get some kills when they were trying to attack into lane. So overall, everyone's playing well. You got Shazam with the op, picking mid, getting aggressive in the apartments, getting a pick window and falling back. Just different moves and things are going quite right here for the first 7 rounds of the half. So that means that our score is now 12-10. So the comeback looks like it's coming here for Cloud9. They're looking really good. However, there is then a round where they just lose a key round at the A-bomb site. Essentially what happened was Shazam gets a pick at window, falls back, but gets caught at the arch side, right afterwards. So it's kind of an even trade. And then from there, VP are able to kind of wrap around Moto as well as attacking lane, and they split the A-bomb site, and they're able to eventually... Shroud stays alive for a very long time inside the pit and actually gets a kill on a guy in Graveyard. And actually, like I said, he actually kind of stays alive and plays really well. I think it was him and Nothing in a 2 versus 2 when it was all said and done. In a post-play situation for VirtusPro, but they could not win that 2 versus 2, and so VP go up now 14-10. So this was kind of, and this, or excuse me, 13-10, but then this causes them to be able to get the next round as well because of some economy situations with Cloud9. So now it's 14-10, and this is where it gets really tough here because now, Cloud9 can't afford to lose a single round further unless they want to play an overtime. If they want to win regulation, they got to win 6 in a row, which they already had a 7-round winning streak earlier in the half, so it's not like it's, impossible or unfeasible or not feasible. I don't think unfeasible is a word. But then there's the infamous round that we were talking about earlier that I made mention of earlier, which was Cloud9 decides to push mid after they had just gotten around on VirtusPro, so the money was not necessarily very good. For VP kind of had some bad money because they lost a lot of players, and they had 1 round, so they're forcing rebuys, and they just didn't have a whole lot of money. The economy wasn't really great because they had lost so many rounds in a row, and even though they won, they had lost a lot of players, forced some rebuys. I don't remember the exact specifics, but the money was not the best for VP. They had kind of a broken buy. And Cloud9 decides to push up mid with a bunch of players. They do. I think Sivis does get a kill at the T stairs, but then he tries to exit banana and Shazam TKs him, so kind of just killing that whole trade. And it winds up coming down to a 2 versus 2 situation that VP wins, and that pretty much make it game over. I think it was actually 15-11 at this point because that's what happened. So Cloud9 had won a round to make it 14-11. That forced VP to save on this round. And then the infamous push happens to actually put VirtusPro at match point 15-11. So, what's the issues with this round? Obviously, the TK from Shazam didn't help on Sivis that kind of killed one of their players that had already had a kill in the round, and that makes things tough. Another situation was because VP's money the way that it wasn't really necessary for Cloud9 to push in this particular instance. Now, Kadian was talking about this on the analysis desk, where as an in-game leader, you always are played with the debate on whether or not you keep doing something that's working. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Yet, if you do that, you risk the other team reading what you've been doing all these rounds, making an adjustment, catching you off guard. And then you may lose now because you decided not to change things up, you were too complacent. But if you do change something up, you take the offensive, you try to change things up to try to catch the other team off guard rather than them catching you off guard. If it works, you look like a genius. If it doesn't, it looks like you failed because you broke something that was working to try something new. So I get that debate, and I don't necessarily disagree with Cloud9 eventually trying some type of aggression to change things up on the CT side, but this just didn't seem like the right scenario. Because of the money VP had and the buy they were in, they kind of just fed into VP's eco, to be honest. When a team's eco, you kind of want to force and execute, not just give them free up close kills, or give them the chance to get those types of kills. Maybe C9 didn't realize what the money was like for VirtusPro, so that could be part of it. That could have been the mistake. They're just not reading the economy of VP well. Another thing is, I mean, in a situation like this, if you give VP 1 more round, they're at match point. So this is kind of a risky time to make a play like this when, VP's already on the brink of winning the match. You're kind of cashing in all your chips on one really big move, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, all of a sudden you gave VirtusPro match point, and you're going away from what was working to get you your comeback. So you could take it either way you want, but eventually this winds up causing them to lose the game. Shazam in general, after the first 7 rounds or so, so like the last few rounds, he was just getting kind of crushed at mid and arch side. He wasn't really able to do a whole lot. He was kind of ineffective. You know, while Sharad's doing his job over at pit very, very well, and B is kind of mixed results. There was definitely some mishaps in play there that was giving VP some entry points and some weaker spots to hit to be able to execute some bomb sites, especially over at A. So there is that game. So basically, the recap that really quick, on T side, they lost the key round in the third, kind of messed up their economy for a while. They let VP control B for way too long in the half before they finally decided to attack it. There was some competing calls on what needed to be done on T side to turn things around between Simphis and Sean and company, which called for Sean's actually good reads to basically be discounted, or he's deterred from approaching them or acting on them because of the calls he's getting from the rest of his team on different plays that they want to try to make. I mean, I'm telling you, this guy suggested hitting B probably 3 or 4 times before they finally actually did it because other people wanted to run some type of strat today. So that kind of hurts when your in-game leader's getting, you know, silenced by other people. And so those are some of the big things there. And on CT side, they had a great comeback coming, but then, you know, they lost kind of a key round at A in a small number situation. In general, they lost a lot of small number situations in this game, which is something they probably need to work on as well, as these 2v2 type situations and kind of hammering out how to play those a bit better together. And so that's, for the most part, this match in general. So now we move on to overpass against TSM, which is the last game, their elimination game basically now. They had beaten TSM earlier on nuke, so you know, people think there's a chance here. Now, there was some concern about North American teams on overpass. There's very limited data because it's not played a whole lot. It's just been recently introduced in league play in North America. In fact, the only times I've ever even seen this Cloud9 team play overpass was with Hiko at Case King when they lost to VirtusPro. And I know with Shazam, they've played it online in NA and SIVO. They lost to Luminosity. They beat Denial. So not a whole lot of data to go off of on this map for North American teams for sure. Hiko at the analysis desk claimed that before DreamHack Winter 14 they really had spent a good amount of time going over executions on this map from the T side and knowing how to play it just in case they were going to have to. He was just wondering whether or not Shazam had been brought up to speed on some of the things they had prepped on overpass, or if they had changed things up, or what they were going to be able to do. Now, from what I could tell from watching the game, you know, it is Cloud9 who starts on T side first. They eventually win 6 rounds, and in general, their executions look very good, mostly at the B bomb side. That's where most executions tended to go that were successful. But they had that eco round on the second round of the first half at A, on like a Tech9 push in the A bomb side. Simphis was really heavy in that to get him around there. And so, just in general, their executions weren't bad. What really happened was, once again, losing these small numbers situations, losing these 2v2s or these 2v3s or whatever in the post plant was mostly what plagued them this half. 6 rounds is actually a pretty strong amount of rounds to get on the T-side overpass, but it could have been much better. They could have maybe gotten, I would say, 8 or 9 rounds at least if they would have had just some better play in some of these post plants. And I'll kind of talk about some of these issues now. So in the 5th round, there's a 2v2 post-plant situation where it's Shroud and Shazam left against 2 guys, and Shazam misses kind of an easy shot on a window player who's able to drop down, and then eventually Shazam gets killed, and then Shroud gets forced to a 1v2 that he loses. So there's that round. Then in the 6th round, Cajun B's in a 1 versus 3 post-plant at the B-bomb site. 1 versus 3, and Shazam misses the shot on him with the op, goes down. The other guys didn't hit their shots either and went down, so I'm not trying to scapegoat Shazam here in both these rounds. Yeah, he did miss kind of an easier op shot, so to speak, but the other people fail too. Anytime it's a 3 versus 1 in your favor and you don't win the round, you kind of have to hold all 3 guys accountable for not playing it better together to win it. So, you know, small rounds, number of situations, really affecting them, especially in post plants, allowing KGB to clutch in 1 versus 3 in the 6th round. That's big. That gives TSM a round they definitely shouldn't have gotten. You also might be able to talk about their economy here in the first half. I know on the 8th round of the half, they decided to buy Tech9s instead of saving. They lose this round. This causes them to have to save the next round in the 9th instead of having a full buy that they could have had. So this is kind of maybe a free round they kind of gave by just the way they played the economy. Once again, kind of competing calls happening here because Sean wanted to save in this round. He's calling, hey, we should save here. You know, we didn't get any kills last round. Let's make sure we can buy next type deal. And Simphus is like, no, dude, we should buy. We should buy. And so Sean's like, all right, and they do buy, and then they wind up losing. Now, I'm not saying that Simphus is always wrong and Sean Gage is always right or something like that, but once again, here's a sign of some competing ideals about how to lead the team in certain situations, and it seems like sometimes the wrong call is getting made because of it, because there is this competition taking place. Not maybe a real competition, but there's conflicting reads and calls being made by a couple of players on this team, and sometimes the better read is being left in the dust in favor of the more popular choice, I guess, or the loudest choice. Not really a big deal in this particular situation because, like I said, they still win 6 rounds, and the more glaring issues were their losses in post plants because of mismanaging small number of situations. But this is just another example of kind of competing interests, so to speak, on the team when it comes to leadership. Once again, they after this situation, they lost a couple of more small number situations. Simphus actually won a big one with a quad kill in the 11th round. But then the last 3 rounds of the half, they once again kind of lose some small number situations over at the B bomb site in the last 2 rounds, I think it was. So the point is, good T side could have been much better, though, if they would have played some of these small number situations better on the T side. Now, when it goes into the second half on CT side, C9 win the pistol, but then they get eco'd the second round. Pretty much the biggest reason why they don't come back in this game was because of this. It screwed up their economy for the entire game, because when you win one, lose one, pretty much forces you to double save. Now, in this case, they actually force buy from my scout, trying to make something happen. Doesn't happen, so it winds up going to a 12-7 scoreline in favor of TSM, just because of getting eco in the second round. Also, even though they wind up winning a round, because Sean has this big round, the A-bomb side with an op, he gets a triple kill with the op inside the A-bomb side and actually wins his team around. They don't even lose. I think they lose 1 player in that whole round. So this is a dominant round to get them to 12-8. But they don't really have an economy still. Even whenever they have all their players pretty much left up still after winning this round, they still don't have a whole lot of money. And then, so while it's 12-8, at the B bomb site, there's a round where Shroud's playing barrels, Nothing's playing this in-between position between sandbags and long B, like on the ramp, and then I think Simphus is playing pit at the B bomb site. And TSM runs a split up long B and sandbags. Now, Nothing is counting on Simphus to be kind of checking his sandbags and kind of watching his bat, because he's focused on, you know, kind of playing a crossfire setup with Shroud, because Shroud's playing the barrel. So when they come out long B, they're going to be shooting him. You know, a headshot ain't going to be tough to hit that headshot. Shroud can't really see sandbags because there's that giant damn pillar right there, so it's not like he can get a good angle unless he really strays out. Plus, he's trying to focus in on long B, so they'll pay attention to him, and Nothing can try to get some free frags from that tight corner. So they're really kind of relying on Simphus to hold this sandbag push. And, well, what happens? Simphus gets flashed, gets forced down into the pit. When he tries to come back up, he's actually throwing counter flashes at long B instead of watching sandbag. So there's a miscommunication here on who's watching what. Nothing was kind of hoping Simphus would watch the sandbags. Even later, he's kind of saying, hey man, like me and Shroud had long B, I really needed you to get my sandbags, I got flanked, I got killed. And that is kind of what happened. He got flank shot in the back, and then this allowed TSM to kind of swallow up the B bomb site after this. So this was just kind of an issue of miscommunication in a key moment, though, because when they lose this round, it's now 13-8. They're forced to save the next round because of a tough economy, so now it's 14-8. And then TSM's able to close the game from there. So it does all start, though, with just a tough second round. You know, getting eco'd there ruined their economy for the rest of the half. They basically couldn't afford to make any more mistakes because it was going to force them to have, you know, another save and give TSM some breathing room. And it just so happens there's just one miscommunication at the B bomb site that was that mistake, which basically allows TSM to capitalize on the poor economy of Cloud9 and then wind up closing out the game. So that's pretty much that game now. So T-side, decent, 6 rounds, not terrible. It's actually a good T-side, but could have been much better had they have handled some post plants better and had some people been connecting their shots better in post plants. Maybe, like I said, 8 or 9 rounds instead of 6. CT side, losing that second round was just the biggest thing. They basically forced them into a scenario where they had to be perfect to come back, and they had that one mistake at B, and that kind of ruined that. So, some takeaways here, some conclusions that we can make now since I've basically recapped all the games and talked about some of the pros and cons from each specific game. So the first point is Shazam's inexperience. I kind of talked about this before. You know, he needing to be brought up to speed. You know, he did have a boot camp before this event with the team to go over some things. I thought he played really well in the TSM game on nuke in that comeback. His op was on point. Against VirtusPro on T side, I kind of talked about all the different issues on the T side. I can't really scapegoat any particular player. One of the T side and Inferno was poor. It was just in general kind of poor for the team, especially in the small number of situations, and in just their reads, or Sean having a good read and it being ignored basically for so long. So there's that. And then when it comes to the TSM game, yeah, there was definitely some shots that he missed on T side with the op and some post plants and things like that, some clutch situations that would have been, you know, big for the team to actually close out those rounds. But in general, I'm not going to scapegoat Shazam or say he's the reason why they lost this tournament or anything like that. I think that there is some decision-making issues maybe there with the team. So obviously the TKs were big on Inferno, those two TKs. That's not really a decision-making issue. That's just kind of a simple mistake, not paying attention or being too shaky or whatever, not being stable and grounded in your thought processes. I know there was this one particular instance on CT side against TSM on overpass where he was playing new truck and then he had to fall back because he was taking a lot of pressure. But then he went back to new truck and got killed, and Sean Garris kind of pointed it out like, hey man, like you shouldn't have went back to new truck. You pretty much put yourself in a suicide position. That was really tough. You should have just stayed back where you were. And Shazam is like, yeah man, gotcha, you know, you're right. So that's just one example of like maybe a poor decision-making process on defending a take from TSM there on that particular round. In general, what I'm trying to get at then is that he's just going to have to learn more. You know, as they play and as people notice things that he's doing, they can correct him, you know, give him some tidbits, some tips. They can, you know, work together as a team on some things. And so I think that Shazam definitely still could be a tool for this team. I mean, they were definitely lacking a dedicated op or someone who wanted to op, someone who could have an impact with the op. Shazam showed at times that he can have an impact with an op, especially against TSM on nuke on that comeback on CT side. Early on against VirtusPro on CT side as well, he had some good rounds with the op, you know, getting aggressive in window and stuff, but eventually he started to kind of take a turn for the worse towards the end of that second half in those last, you know, 4 or so rounds. And on T side, you know, on his T sides in general, he kind of had mixed results. He had some good entries against TSM on overpass, even with the op over towards the B side, but then in post plants is where he kind of faltered. So there's still some experience that needs to be gained there for Shazam, I think, to work with the team a bit more, kind of learn as a team what they want to do better, and just get him some more experience and some more reps. Can't scapegoat nothing this event either because he honestly played well. I mean, he played really well against VirtusPro on CT side. Against T side, I've already talked about all the issues there just as a team. I thought he did his job on nuke CT side as well as part of that comeback that they had playing that upper bomb site with Shroud pretty well. And against TSM, I've kind of talked about all the issues that game as well. So I'm not going to scapegoat any particular player. I think collectively there were some bigger, you know, overarching issues that really affected Cloud9 rather than a particular player doing bad that needed to be scapegoated based on just an individual performance. The biggest one, like I said, was losing small number situations. So I think everyone was kind of a part of that at some point or another, losing 2v2s, whatever. That's the biggest thing that they need to work on. I think the communication issue is big here. I think there's too much communication. There's too many voices chiming in, so that causes a lot of uncertainty. That causes a lot of, you know, questioning of exactly what's to happen. Maybe Sean knows exactly what he wants to do, has a good read, but then all these voices are chiming in his head, telling him something different. He's either forced to concede and go with what they want to do and forget about what he was thinking about, or, you know, if he does have a really strong read, he doesn't get to get it out until later. Finally, he's like, okay, no, we're doing this. Like, I'm taking the reins. Which is good that finally happened, especially in this Inferno T-side against VirtusPro, and they could have been exploiting B much earlier in the game had they have listened to Sean originally, but maybe he needs to take the reins a bit earlier, kind of shut the voices down a bit earlier if he knows for sure he's got the read that he wants. So that could be a thing there. It's the competing, I wouldn't say erratic leadership, but some kind of competing leadership there, which isn't necessarily, like I said, always bad. It's good to have, you know, some insight. I mean, Sean, if he was just all by himself, no one's giving him anything, that's a tough spot to be in as an in-game leader. So you want, you know, some advice, or you want some thoughts or some observations from your team. And I know Simpus has been an in-game leader for this squad in the past, so obviously he has some experience doing it, and he's a smart guy, but it just seems like when it's save that for when you're scrimming and prepping, or save it as just an observation, like, hey, they're doing this, maybe we could do this. But when it's live match on the line, I think they just need to kind of trust in Sean to lead the team. Maybe give him some observations, suggestions here and there, but don't let the other 3 or 4 players be the dominant voice over your in-game leader, is my point. It seemed like Sean's getting quieted down quite a lot from someone else on the team. So that's something else to think about besides the small number of situations. Obviously, just getting Shazam more reps and more experience is going to go a long way for them as well. Point is, I definitely think I saw some improvement on this team, especially their CT side looked better, especially on that Inferno game against VirtusPro. I know they lost, but it still looked much better than any other CT side they've had on that map recently. So cool there. Now I'll just do one last thing before I sign off. I know this has already drug on pretty long, but I didn't want to make a separate video for this point. But I know that there's been rumors, or not really rumors, because nothing kind of confirmed that they're thinking about it, in some interviews he did, about Cloud9 moving to Europe and what this might mean. So this is just like a separate, basically, thought process than the whole rest of the video, separate topic. So I'll timestamp this. What could be good about this decision, what could be bad about this decision? So what I immediately think back to is this. So there was this long period of time where Cloud9 and other North American teams, well, they were Complexity at the time, were complaining about not being able to get enough prep. The practice is bad in North America. They weren't being able to get enough proper preparation and practice to be able to compete correctly or properly at these majors. So they would need boot camps in Europe, and sometimes they would get a good boot camp in Europe, sometimes they wouldn't. And so when they wouldn't, they would say, we need more, like we didn't get enough prep, we really need more practice, really need better practice, and so that was the argument, right? Well then, at DreamHack Winter 14, Cloud9 with Hiko, I mean, they had played Face It, they played ESWC, they didn't leave after those 2 events, they played in Case King while they were in Europe, they boot camped for a couple of weeks, I think they were in Europe for like a month, or close to it, maybe a little longer, maybe a little less, I don't know. Then they go to DreamHack Winter 14, they lose in groups again. Actually, this is the first time they ever lost in groups, I guess, because in Cologne they made it out of groups kind of barely. But in this was the first time they got eliminated in group play at a major. They had already got eliminated in group play at Face It and ESWC, obviously. Asked about it afterwards. Seems like the general consensus of the team was they got burnt out. They were there too long. Maybe they spent too long there. Like Hiko said that kind of in an interview. Nothing mentioned it in some interviews. They got burnt out. They were there too long. So, if they're planning on living in Europe for several months, obviously they're going to get a lot of good practice and preparation potential, but is it going to come down to this issue again of getting burnt out or being there too long? So therefore, does what could be a very positive experience of getting a lot of practice and preparation and being in a good environment to prepare yourselves for big events, is it going to become a burden or wind up being toxic to the team because they get burnt out or they're there too long? Now, I'm sure there's some happy balance you could find between overworking yourself while you're living there for that long. You know, maybe when they were there for that whole month, maybe they were playing like 10 hours a day or something, and that's why they got so burnt out. Maybe if they were there for several months and they're playing only, you know, 4 or 5 days a week for, you know, 6 hours a day or something, maybe that's like much more manageable, so they won't get burnt out, but they'll still be there for a long time and get good prep. I'm sure there's some happy balance that can happen there, especially for someone like Shazam, who doesn't have as much experience as the rest of the team. This could be very beneficial for him. As a team, it could be very beneficial to really shape up what they want to do with this 5, what type of style, what type of identity they want to have on T side and CT side, all that good stuff. It could be very beneficial, but it could also be an issue if they wind up somehow getting burnt out or whatever, like I mentioned earlier. Also, I just know, like, when Titan did a team house for a long time and seemed to cause issues socially, you know, Shocks, I think, wound up quitting the team almost purely based off of this. I mean, there might have been some other things, too, why he quit, but this was one of the biggest things. He didn't want to be in the house. You got to think, I mean, you're keeping these guys away from their family, friends, possibly if they have a significant other, for several months. I mean, maybe the players can handle that, maybe they can't. Maybe they get along just fine now being together for a week or so for a LAN in person, but maybe if they're there for several months, it causes social issues. So there's always that you have to think about as well. I think the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because it seems like everything that I hear about this is, oh, this will be great, this will be awesome, this will really give them what they need, this is great. And then everyone's really excited about Keystars making the same thing from Brazil, you know, going to Europe for a while. This is awesome, this is great, this will really help them out. You're right, it really could, but there's also some concerns you have to worry about, especially just from the rhetoric that I'm hearing from Cloud9 after DreamHack Winter 14th, that month-long kind of boot camp LAN phase, where it could wind up being more trouble than it's worth, so to speak. So we'll just have to kind of see what decision they make. I'm sure they're weighing all this out, but my point is don't just blindly accept this as definitely being positive. It could have some issues. It also is going to hurt the North American scene, if I'm honest. I know that this is not in C9's thought process because they got to focus on what's best for them. So this is just kind of an aside. It will hurt the NA scene a bit because we've already lost 2 top teams with, you know, Aba Power and Torqued just, you know, a couple of months ago. Losing Cloud9 would be basically our 3rd team loss in the North American scene in just a few months. And we're talking like our 3 top teams in the scene. Now, I know that Elevate has been playing really well. They're working their way up. Luminosity's and New Kids on the Block. They're working their way up. You got CLG, who's still here. So those are kind of the other 3 big teams around. I know the Nile qualified for CVO and ESCA lands, but I'm still not really sure about them, to be honest, just because they just made 2 roster changes right before they qualified with Sanctington and I can't remember who the other guy was. Professor Chaos. So I don't really know how those 2 guys are going to perform on land, so I don't really know anything about the Nile just yet. Those are, I guess, the other 4 teams. And you have Liquid, of course, who I've already talked deeply about some of the issues I see with them, which is I think Adra needs to just take the in-game leadership, and I'm not going to go into that again, but Liquid, I'm not even really sure. They're doing really well in FACE, but they didn't qualify for ECRC, but so there's some issues there. So my point is that the NA scene, as it is already has a lot of good teams, but no real excellent teams, just really rising above everyone else, really establishing themselves as the best in the region, and, you know, giving NA like this really good chance of making out a group play at the next 250K major. I know CLG was close. Well, kind of. They won their first map, and they just kind of bombed the second 2. Cloud9 was definitely close. I mean, winning the first map, they were making a comeback against VirtusPro and Inferno. They just fell short of that with a couple of mistakes, and then they had a good first half against TSM on overpass. Could have been much better, and, you know, on CT side, they kind of bombed out after an eco round. So they're close, but I think we just don't have anyone that's really dominating and really putting themselves in a favorites type position, like to be a favorite out of a group or something like that. So it could hurt the NA scene as well to have that. I know they already dropped out of CVO land when I'm recording this video, so that kind of hurts as well. I can understand the reasoning behind it, though, but I think next time around, CVO has enough prize money to where this won't be an issue with their partnership with MLG for Season 7. So yeah, we'll just have to see how this whole C9 going to Europe thing pans out, I guess, before we talk about it more. But that's why this video is a little bit longer, is because I spent some time talking about it, kind of a separate issue than Katowice for Cloud9, because I didn't want to make a separate video. Probably should have. Whatever. I did it here and now. Anyway, just be on the lookout for more stuff. If you enjoyed yourself, just follow and subscribe. Other than that, I think I pretty much touched on everything I wanted to, and hope you enjoy. Thanks.